on this computer. Okay. So we are recording. If you're on a computer that does not have a microphone or camera, feel free to use the chat box for questions or input. And Sam, who's on as well, if I'm not catching your chat, should help just kind of flag that and let me know if a question has come up. So first of all, thanks for making some time for this. We will talk a little bit about grant writing today, kind of an overview of some of the things that go into writing successful grant proposals. I'm Josh Vanek. I think I've met you all. I work here for Campus Compact, and I've written a number, mostly of federal grants over my career with Compact, and so I have some solid kind of background in grant writing, and I'm happy to be a resource after the call as well if you're sort of thinking through, hey, my project or my organization really kind of asked me to look into some of this and I'm feeling like I don't know where exactly to go next. I'm more than happy to follow up after the fact. So yeah, my jokey kind of subtitle here is How to Build Your Dream, or Round Pegs and Square Holes, a Love Story. Let's see. So outcomes here for today are that we get a brief introduction to grant writing, some ideas, tips, and resources, and some opportunities for discussion. So please weigh in if you have something to add. If you've written grants or are working on one currently and have some better information. This stuff constantly is changing, and there are always good resources that pop up. And I don't claim to have the market cornered on this information. So please do share what you know as we're going through this. So some of the basics. What exactly is a grant, and how about a grant proposal? What's a grant proposal? How are those things different? So anybody who's got a mic or who is called into this have an idea of how you would define a grant? Let's hear a quick look at I know where my chat went to. Okay, well, I'll just keep moving it along here. So some of the some of the possible answers here: money, a gift, a funding request, a compelling case made to a funder for resources to support your work, something else. So in short, a grant is money. It is dollars that is granted to you with some expectations associated with them. So I think it's not a bad way to define it. It's kind of money with an asterisk attached with it. A grant is different from a grant proposal. So a grant is kind of what you're aiming for. It's your goal. You want to get funding to support some kind of a project. A grant proposal is your vehicle to get there. So this is kind of your narrative, your budget, your attachments, your case that you make for funding the project that you've put together. So that's kind of some basics. I imagine this is already understood, so we'll move it along here. This PowerPoint was pretty loaded with text exclusively, so I decided to spice it up a little bit. So I got a pop quiz here on this Friday morning. Who knows where in Montana this photograph was taken? Chat box. Rebecca Cotula says, my computer has neither webcam nor mic, so I'm here by phone. Okay, well, we'll do our best to explain this. Anyone else who has joined with a microphone know where this photograph, Sam Garrettson says, out near Dawson Community College. Erica Groundick says, I don't know either, but I'd love to go there. So it's a picture of Badlands, and this is actually, it's right out the back door of Dawson Community College. This is a picture of Makoshika State Park. Not quite southwest Montana, more southeast Montana. All right. So some of the basics. This world of grants is loaded with jargon, and for that reason, it can be it can seem very foreign and off-putting if you're coming at it as someone who has not taken a dive into grant writing before. So some of the jargon associated with grants: an RFP is a request for proposals. That's essentially an application, a place where folks make it known that they have funding available for specific kinds of work. So that's oftentimes a packet of information that has a specific application and the instructions to apply for the funding, including a deadline, all of the attachments that go with it. Some funders ask for resumes of the key staff, bios, and so forth, a copy of your organizational bylaws, all number of things. An EIN or an FEIN is an employer identification number or federal employer ID number. Every organization or campus, nonprofit organization, anybody who employs people in the United States should have an EIN, and that's a critical part of applying. An MOU is a memorandum of understanding, so if you're working with partners, that may be something that you need to put together to show that you have actual partnerships in place for this proposal. A NOFA and a NOFO are notices oftentimes on the Federal Registry where grants are officially made known, federal grants. A NOFA means the funds actually are committed and there, and a NOFO means there's the expectation that they will be coming available, and there's work to develop proposals for it. Where's my chat? Absolutely. So we got Erica asking, can the slideshow be sent out? We will fire it off following the conference call. Sam, if you could help me with that, I'd appreciate it. So there are, like I said, this is a jargon-filled world with all kinds of things that you don't typically encounter in your daily work, I imagine. So a good resource is grants.gov, and this specific URL has a good grant terminology grant terminology listing, and it's pretty robust. Good amount of information. All right, so some of the basics. I think it's easy to get psyched out when you're thinking about, okay, I'm looking for funding for a project, and this is perhaps new to me. I kind of understand the basic premise. You apply for and then you receive money to support some work, right? That's kind of the basic deal. So rolling it back even a step farther, I think, is important, and thinking really in clear terms about what is the need or the problem that you've identified in your community that you're trying to address. So if it's, you work with a food bank and you realize that there are, a lot of hungry kids in your community, and it's affecting their schoolwork and all kinds of things. That's a pretty, clearly stated need. If you realize, gosh, we are not, our high school is not graduating the number of students that we need to, and they're not going on, they're not completing high school, let alone going on to post-secondary education, and that's going to affect their earning potential lifelong earning potential that's leading to poverty. Really starting there versus starting with, okay, where's the money at? Who are the different funders? I think is a good kind of grounding philosophy to think about, okay, what's my VISTA project about? What's the work that I'm tasked with? What is this organization? What do we do fundamentally? And how will some money and input of some money help expand that or help us address this problem real specifically? So that need or problem is not a dollar figure, and it's not a lack of money. Certainly a lack of resources can lead to other problems, but it should be a real simple to understand, look, here's what it is. This is the need or problem that we're looking to address. So starting there, I think, is crucial to being successful in this. Periodically, I'll check the chat, but if folks do have mics hooked up, feel free just to speak openly. So some of the basics. If you were to put on your funder hat, like if you were a person that worked at a foundation or a government agency that gave out dollars, I'd like you to rank these in order in terms of the most compelling need statement to the very least. So we have three examples of a need statement here. Our community needs funding to support activities for young people. Our community needs more healthy activities for youth. Based on a recent health department study, 3 of 5 young people don't get enough regular exercise, and we're working to change that. So let's go look up here in the chat. Sarah Harker likes number 3 best, number 2 second best, and number 1 least. I think that's pretty much, and Cora agrees. I think that's a good arrangement. And it's not to say that longer is always better, but I think having, Rebecca likes what Cora and Sarah said as well. Kevin O'Brien, however, likes number 3 best, number 1 second, and number 2 least. So yeah, if I were to rank these, I think I definitely would say number 3, to me, because it's got some evidence associated with it, says, hey, here's kind of what we're looking at that gives us this argument. The other ones aren't bad. They say, look, we're looking for something that's ultimately good. Everybody kind of agrees that healthy activities or activities for young people are things that you want in a community, that kind of lend to support. To me, anytime you've talked about, immediately talked about the funding in terms of your need, you're kind of missing the point, or you're letting it known that you're a little bit desperate. So keeping that focus on the need or problem, which in this case is exercise for young people and opportunities to get exercise and be healthy, and some evidence that supports that, you're doing yourself a favor. As soon as you say we need funding to get there, I think you're at a slight disadvantage. So I think I agree with Kevin in terms of the second one probably being the least, or the second best option. It doesn't have anything about the dollars in it. It says, basically, our community needs more healthy activities. It doesn't have any evidence associated with it, but it also doesn't say, here's our if-then statement. If we get some money, we can do these healthy activities. Otherwise, what are we going to do? It's got less desperation to me than the first one. Good. So some more of the basics. Make sure that it's really money that you're after. And this, I think in a competitive world where absolutely dollars and budgets are important, this isn't to diminish the importance of having ample funding to support, community initiatives. but it's to say that you've really put this through the ringer and asked the hard questions. Are there other ways we can get this stuff accomplished? Because remember, a grant is a short-term input of funding with a beginning and end. And if you're saying, look, this is a problem that has a longer tail than maybe this grant, you know, we need to really make change happen, and we want it to be sustained, so that we're not back to square one in 5 or 10 years. You know, we're not going to see a drop in our obesity rate in the community and then have it increase again as soon as this grant ends. You know, really, that's not what we're after. We're after, you know, sort of hammer from day one of your VISTA service, you know, that help communities kind of help themselves, and how do we do things that that make lasting change happen. So sometimes money can bring problems if there's not strong community support for it. So if there hasn't been an intentional kind of process, an inclusive process that says, hey, look, how are we going to execute this? Who's going to be involved? Are we bringing the players to the table? Folks can really kind of, you know, dollars can bring with them all kinds of problems. So really do ask those hard questions. Is it money that we need, or is there another way that we could address this? Can we use existing resources in this community and people to deal with this problem? Because some needs in community are better served with other resources, volunteers, partnerships, you know, better thinking, new technology. Sometimes those things can help, as long as you've got that real good grounding in a needs-focused approach, and you realize it's not money we're after, it's addressing this community need. Sometimes there are other ways to skin the cat. So an example of this is you've identified a community need to support college access for low-income, first-gen high school students. So perhaps a well-organized volunteer corps or a group of volunteers that puts on a couple FAFSA workshops may make a bigger difference than a grant that comes with all kinds of strings attached. So if you think that's just one example. A grant may be nice, but it might just be, oh, you know, we've got some money to spend on this, and we could have actually pulled it off with volunteers or with some better coordination. So I think as Vistas, you're in a unique position to ask some of those hard questions and say, are we chasing money, or are we trying to address a community need? And I encourage you to do that. You know, do so respectfully, but I think also reminding people that we're about making lasting change, and sometimes money is not the biggest variable there. So that's all I'll say there. Any comment or opinion here on this one? Oh, geez. Okay, moving down. Where in Montana is this picture taken? Chat box. We got nothing in the chat box. Anybody with a microphone on? Got an idea? Quiet bunch today. Jeez. Well, I guess I'll just move along. I will provide the answer and I will move along. This is also in southeastern Montana. This is a Montana state park called Medicine Rocks, which is down by Ekalaka, Montana. Out east. Thanks, Kevin. On the prairie. Yes, in that part of the state. So some of the basics. Think hard about this funding's fidelity with your mission. So that just means, is it going to be a good fit? You know, can we move around a little bit so that we're not having to change significantly what our core kind of work is? Does this funding fit with what we're about? So I think always asking these questions, are we chasing dollars here, or are we finessing a point? There's always going to be some finessing. You know, you may have found some Some dollars that are specifically focused on summer nutrition. And you think, gosh, if kids have got their kind of basic nutritional needs met, we might be able to get them into our after school, our summer enrichment program, which has an academic component to it. So it's, we can finesse this and just be honest about where we're coming from, but ultimately these dollars will help us support it. On the flip side, if it's really a stretch and, you're having to sort of learn about all kinds of, what this funder is about and what the activities they, expect, and it really is nowhere near what your organization is capable of or does, I think good to really acknowledge that and ask hard questions of whether it's a good fit or not. And another point is making sure that the need that you've identified, so going back to this earlier slide of really having this be driven by the need first and foremost and not the money, making sure that falls well under your mission and links directly with your work. Because it may simply be that, you don't have the organizational capacity to pull it off, and that's a rough spot to be in. And I say this because grants, especially federal grants, come with a hefty amount of administration. The need to do billing, the need to provide solid accounting, the need to do reporting, the need to have, maintain compliant records. It's a lot typically. So if it's a good fit, it makes that worth it. If it's a tough fit, you're struggling to see how it makes sense, I think it's oftentimes not worth it. So, I think where I sort of typically fall is if we're finessing, that's fine. We can figure out how this links in with what we're about. Or if we're chasing and it really just feels like, gosh, this money would be nice. Some money would be great, right? I think you should really own that and ask some harder questions about maybe finding a different source. Next up, thinking about planning a theory of change. So this basically says that, hey, we're going to do a certain amount of this intervention, a certain amount of these activities with these inputs, and we hope that it leads to these results. So it says, like, by doing this, we hope to achieve this. And it starts with some inputs, activities, outputs, which are kind of shorter term, but can be measured, products of your work. And then some longer term outcomes, which are kind of perhaps harder to measure, but also a product of the work. And then long-term impacts, which are really the change that you're hoping to see occur. So those come about by virtue of these inputs and activities that the funder is helping with. So examples of inputs are the materials, trainers, and participants in this case. The activities are, we're going to do a training event and then a follow-up. Some of the outputs, how we'll measure our immediate kind of success with this thing is we're going to count the number of participants that got trained and the number of workshops. So we set goals for ourselves. We said we would reach at least 100 community members and hold at least 4 workshops. How did we do against that metric? The outcome then is, we want to have our participants capable of doing these things that we train them for, and we'll survey them at the end of this training to ask whether they are or they aren't. And then long term, the change that we're hoping to achieve are better decisions made by our trainees. So we were maybe training them on financial literacy, and our immediate stuff was we wanted people there to be trained. We wanted them to rate that that the training made sense and that they understood what the stuff was about. And longer term, we want to see folks making better decisions and maybe opening savings accounts as an impact. So that's the theory of change, and I think a lot of funders these days asks that you have some kind of rationale or kind of model here and this is a very simple one. They can get very complex, but that maps out, okay, here's our inputs, our activities, as well as our outputs, outcomes, and impacts. So that's what a theory of change is. Questions or experience on that? Okay. Keep moving. Most funders are interested both in how you identified the problem or the need that you're working on, but also something that says, hey, this thing we plan to do actually works. You know, the efficacy of this intervention in kind of jargony speak. So has somebody else made this work before? Has it been studied? Do we know that mentoring achieves results, and what is the dosage of mentoring, you know, over the course of a school year? What is the minimum number of hours that gets you to those desired results? Funders are pretty sophisticated about this. They don't want to throw money at things. And I think finding some evidence that supports, hey, we know that a backpack program leads to, you know, better high school graduation. A backpack food program leads to better high school graduation by sort of helping shore up students' nutritional needs. We see them perform better in school, as evidenced by the Montana Department of Health and Human Services study of 2013. Digging into that and doing some of that research work really is important, I think, in putting together a grant proposal that says, not only do we have a good sense of the need and have a plan to address it, but we've also looked at how do you do this in a way that does move the needle and does achieve some change, you know, some degree of change that we're working at. Funders don't want to fund a whole lot of, you know, pilot work, you know. Certainly there's funding for piloting and, you know, a program and attempting a set of ideas, but they really like working on, okay, here's the existing body of evidence that says this stuff works. These people are aware of it, and that's what they're using as their approach. So an example is that you might see in the narrative, a grant narrative. Our work will be similar to Kalamazoo's after-school program, where their school attendance improved by 15%. Some types of grants that are out there, and I apologize, I don't know if the screen is, if you're seeing this cut off as well. Foundation grants, so large regional and national foundations like the Kellogg Foundation, the Gates Family Foundation. You know, you listen to NPR, you hear several foundation names, folks that, you know, come from big family money. Oftentimes kind of, you know, old business money in the United States. Oftentimes is a large philanthropic wing with a foundation associated with it. And then there also are state and local foundations that do giving as well. Examples like the Montana Community Foundation, or in a county, the Greater Ravalli Foundation. There are family foundations that are very locally focused. And foundations obviously are private. So it's not, you know, it's not government dollars. So oftentimes, as the stock market does it, you know, incredibly well, family foundations have a bunch of money to give away because they have large stock holdings, and the tax code says if you give away a certain amount of your wealth, you know, that's better for you from a tax standpoint. And so there's tax incentive to do this. There are corporate foundations as well. PPL Montana's Community Foundation is an example of one of these. That's the Pacific Power and Light, and I think it's based in Billings, and they do some relatively small giving around different community projects. Huge grantors, the government, both state and federal. So the U.S. Department of Education funds grants for all sorts of things, as an example. And then in some cases, institutions offer grants. So large universities might say, we're looking to get folks thinking about, improving the delivery of our services and study that. So sometimes large colleges and universities will have institutional funds that they make available. Other types of grants that folks are aware of? Check on the chat here. Okay. All right, another one here. Where in Montana would you see these natural bridges? I'm looking for specifics. It's definitely in eastern Montana. So this one is, I think, between Billings and Miles City. Yes, I'm being unfair. Thanks, Lenore. Lots of cool stuff out east. Definitely, I just mined a few pictures from the internet. This is in the Terry Badlands, which is outside of Terry, Montana, which is between Billings and Miles City. And crazy that we have these kind of formations, huh? I am not an eastern Montanan. I do have some interest in eastern Montana, but I'm from Yakima, Washington originally. I've lived in Missoula though for over half my life. So that's in the Terry Badlands. Moving along. Some places to find notices. So a notice is where somebody posts, hey, we've got some money available to do these things. So foundation grants, sort of the default for foundation grants, and a great resource for finding these is the Foundation Center, and they have a website that has a searchable by kind of issue area database called foundationcenter.org. Caitlin is letting us know that Carly and she are alone out there in Poplar, Montana, where there are many of these cool features. Grants.gov is the clearinghouse for the federal government and has, I think, by statute, all federal agencies are required to post their notices of funding on grants.gov. And so it is a huge database of different funding sources from every federal agency that you can think of. State government has a website here in Montana called fundingmt.org that does a similar function as grants.gov, where it kind of collects all of the different state agencies' notices of funding and puts them in a single place. And then for corporate grants, the Foundation Center is pretty good for this as well, although getting the good sort of lay of the land with your state and knowing kind of, okay, who gives out some corporate funding here and what's their process for it. You may talk with somebody like a Montana Community Foundation to get a sense of where to learn about dollars that come available from the private sector and from businesses. Pause here for a bit. Sorry about that. And then the final thing that I recommend on learning about notices of funding is really thinking about, okay, what's in our wheelhouse? Who are the nonprofit organizations? What are the government agencies that kind of do the kind of work that we are after? that we're about, and find out if they have listservs that you can sign up to, or just bookmark their websites and the grants kind of page, and keep in touch with those specific ones. Like anything, I think digging into it and doing some research is what's going to get you kind of the needle in the haystack, the grant that is closest to the work that you're looking to do. Other resources or tools that folks know about for where to find notices of funding? Okay, well, if folks do know of others, please do share them, and we'll include them as we send out the PowerPoint after this. Okay, so some how-tos. So I think of it as there are two main parts to a grant application. There's a narrative portion and a budget portion. There also, an application is going to take all kinds of other things that get attached with it. But the big components of a grant application, basically are the words section and the numbers section. So the narrative and then the budget. The narrative is your case for, why the funding should be given to you. It's your opportunity to make a compelling argument that says, with a little bit of money, we can do amazing things. I think of, and this is based on a really successful grant writing friend of mine's advice, who also had a journalism background, think really basically and use those 5 W's and the H, the who, what, when, where, why, how. Make sure that you're covering those early on so that people can wrap their head around who you are, what you want to do, when you want to do it, where this happens, why it's important, and how you're going to go about it. If you cover those things, you've at least established a minimum kind of baseline for somebody understanding what you're about and what you're trying to do. And then thinking about this funding as very much for a discrete project with a beginning and an end. So oftentimes, on this point, what you'll hear is, we need some funding, we need funding, right, to do our stuff. Well, a grant is really kind of focused on a specific performance period. And we'll talk about that in a second here. So it'll have a start date and an end date that you can use the money. So you really have to think in terms of, we're going to roll out this project, and we're going to do it with this grant funding. So that may be a year, it may be 5 years, it may be 6 months. But being clear about when it happens, because that's part of the funding's expectation. They may have rules around, especially with the federal government, when the money may be used and when it can't be used. So that's a good thing to keep in mind as you're starting to think about it. So some of the parts, some of the basics of a narrative, there should be a set of questions that are provided. And if you really intentionally answer those questions, you're doing better than, in my opinion, probably 80% of people who apply for grants. Folks don't want you to kind of go off and write a novel. They want you to answer the questions in a pretty straightforward fashion. I mean, I think you should write clearly and use paragraphs and make it a very readable narrative as best you can. But make sure that somebody can just go down a list and say, yep, they answered this, they answered this, they answered this. And there's nothing that comes back as, couldn't find it. So doing that in the same sequence that the questions are answered is a tip, and making sure that you are covering everything that is asked is another tip. These sound like super basic things, but I think they're crucial. And sometimes going back to the basics is a good way to just write a successful proposal. Do not get trapped by more is better. Don't think about a maximum page uh, limitation as a goal. If they say applications may not exceed 30 double-spaced pages, think, hey, what do people want to, how much time do people want to spend reading a grant application? Can I give it to them in X number of pages and make my case really, really strongly? More is not better in this. I think if you wear people out, you're going to get scored lower, which will lead to a less likelihood of getting the funding that you're after. Write concisely and specifically. Nobody likes doing this. We like our long sentences. We like our sort of fancy stuff, and specifics are hard. Really writing specifically is a pain, because you got to learn exactly. You got to do some setting of goals. You have to talk about what you hope to achieve in very clear terms and with metrics associated with it. But that will be a breath of fresh air to a lot of people who read grants, because they are used to getting massive, flowery, unspecific proposals. So if you can write concisely using short sentences and tight language, and specifically talk about the change that you're planning to bring about with these dollars, I think you'll be in better shape than many other applicants. Use a voice that gives the impression that you're a strong and capable organization, and that you need only a portion of these resources to address the problem. So you've got something there. You've got X, Y, and Z already committed to this, whether it's some staffing or a place to do the work, or some solid partnerships in place. You have some things going for you already, and these resources are only a portion of what you need to actually get this work done. Talk clearly about the positive benefits that will come about of this investment. So really thinking of it as an investment. Somebody giving you dollars to run a project for a summer is somebody saying, it sounds like you know what you're doing, and these dollars will make a difference in the lives of the 35 young people that you said would come and participate in this summer camp, for example. So not being shy about what good will come of this. I think some folks think, gosh, this is accountability, right? If you say specifically, we hope to change the lives of 35 young people, that's what these dollars are going to buy. You better have at least 35 young people come into your camp, and you better hope that they stick with it and they, end up getting something from it, right? That can be a little bit scary. It is kind of holding yourself to a standard. But I also think it's appreciated when somebody is saying, if we're going to make an investment, these folks were serious. They have a number associated with this. They have ways of measuring their success, and those are the kinds of things that get you scored well when it comes to a grant proposal. Questions about the narrative at this stage? Okay, I'll keep moving. So budgeting for grants. Some of the basics here. So I really recommend building a budget that's based on your real needs, and carefully thinking about what it's going to cost to get this work done, and spending some serious time on that. And working with somebody who has a good sense of numbers, I think, is the other piece of it. Most of your host sites will have somebody who does kind of the fiscal operations of the college or the nonprofit. That person is your friend when it comes to budgeting. You can talk about, okay, these are what I think it's going to cost. We want to do this, this, and this. Here's what I think it is. They'll ask you the hard questions that maybe you haven't considered. So when you're building a budget, think hard about what you need to get done and what it's going to cost, and be honest about that. A lot of grantors don't like to pay for significant administrative costs. So your basics of running your organization they're on you. You should have that covered, or at least most of it. So those need to be on the organizational contribution side of the budget, not the grantor, not the requested side of the budget. Or very carefully, you need to include those with your project budget. So if you say like, look, we can pull this thing off, but we're going to need a staffer. We're going to need a half-time staffer for the 6 months that we plan to do this intervention. We don't currently have that person. We're building it into the budget. That's an example of putting it into that project side of things, and just being clear that, we do not have the staffing capacity to pull this thing off. We do have a lot of other things lined up, but we're going to need a little bit of staff. Some funders say we just won't fund staff. We'll fund other stuff. So, there's some creative ways to address some of these challenges, but the idea that your administrative costs are your own is one that's generally understood among funders, both private and government funders. In kind is a jargony thing that comes up, and this is just the cash value that gets associated with things like time and effort, or donated space, or donated food, or the things that you've kind of marshaled behind your project. So if you've got some things on the books, you got people saying like, yeah, we'll kick in for this. That sounds great. You want to pull off a summer camp, but you're looking for some dollars to cover your travel. Making a good list of what you have committed and the cash value of those things shows your the in-kind value that has been committed to this project. And funders like to see that kind of thing. They may ask that you report on it. They may say like, well, you said you could deliver $25,000 worth of in-kind contributions. During your grant performance, you may need to actually have a method for capturing that, which is, it's not a bad thing, but if you propose it, there's a decent chance you'll have to actually deliver it. Some more tips here for actually writing a proposal. Locate your organization's IRS tax-exempt information. That's the EIN number. Typically somebody, director or accountant or fiscal person with your campus or organization should know this pretty easily. Work with your board. If you've got a board structure or an advisory group, these folks oftentimes are connected to all kinds of funders, and they may just get a constant sort of barrage of sorry, battling a little head cold here. They may get a constant sort of feed of different funding opportunities that they're not acting on. So talking to those local folks and saying, hey, when you see stuff coming along, let me know, because I'm currently looking to find some money for XYZ intervention, after school program or college access program or summer camp opportunity or financial, what it is that you're working on. So those local supporters are great resources, just in terms of like having a good lay of the land, especially if you're relatively new to a community or if you've moved for service. Networking with those people and saying, let me know when stuff comes along. I've got on my VAD, developing some funding. Chat box, what do we got? Shout out to United Way. Yeah, absolutely. United Way is a great local funder, and they do all kinds of local fundraising and then distribution. So newsletters from foundations, corporations, banks, United Ways, the Kids Link after school program in the Gallatin Valley is hosted directly with the Greater Gallatin United Way, and they fund all sorts of great work, as do other United Ways across Montana. So those are awesome local partners to talk with about what their current giving looks like and how you might apply for funding from them. Always, always, always have somebody else read what you've written. and give you that honest, tough feedback. So you may have a grant deadline that's, March 3rd. In terms of your internal kind of timeline, back that up quite a ways, because getting somebody else to read and give you some hard feedback on what you've written will make your proposal stronger. So, you are making a case for why what you're doing is worthy of investment. So having somebody else read it, especially somebody who maybe doesn't know your organization well, and say, like, this made a lot of sense. I had no idea what this was about. You need to bolster up this, will help you write a better grant, period. And again, on this point, focus on the clear, specific, and compelling versus beautiful. Beautiful writing is nice, but, shoot for the middle, I think. Relatively short sentences that are compact and businesslike will get the job done, and people will appreciate that, versus like long paragraph long sentences that require sort of pulling back and thinking through. This is not the place for beautiful writing, I would say. If you can pull it off in a short and specific and compelling fashion, you're a good writer. I'm not telling you to write badly. I'm saying focus on that clear, specific, and compelling. This is a sales job. Any grant is a sales job, and you want to really write convincingly, and give the impression that you have what it takes to pull off this work. Beautiful is nice, but it's a luxury, I think, and you may not have the space for it in many cases. Ooh, I think this is the final one. Where in Montana is this cave? Rebecca keeps using the private message, and I can't see it for some reason. Yeah, Cora got it. Petroglyphs, State Park outside of Billings. Good guesses. You can actually see old carvings in that rock, or paintings rather. Petroglyphs are paintings, pictographs are carvings into the rock. That's a little bit south of Billings. So that is what I've got here for this morning. I've got my email and phone number up here. Let's talk a little bit. Sam Garrettson would like to know, is that cave spelunkable? It is not. It's not a deep cave. It's not a limestone cave. It's a sandstone cave, and it's pretty shallow, in fact. At this point, do folks have questions, or are there items that you wish we had covered more of, or things you'd like to share with your colleagues?
Quiet bunch.
What's that, Sam?
A quiet bunch.
Quiet bunch, yeah. I'm seeing Rebecca messages, but I think they're defaulting to privately, and they're not displaying on my end. So sorry, I can't see it. Michelle Siebert says, is there anywhere where we can find examples of successful grants? Yeah, and Sarah asked the same. Good questions. Successful grant examples. The short answer is yes. I think some funders may have examples of successful grant proposals that they're willing to share. And then, some nonprofits and some college campuses, if you have relationships with different offices, they may, I think this is, we don't, at Campus Compact have a sort of database of successful grant applications. But I think talking to your supervisor about folks in their networks that write grants and that might be willing to share a narrative or a budget, especially if it's something that you're not in direct competition for, or that's like long gone, I think is a completely appropriate thing. So I think,
Hey, Josh.
yeah,
It's Blake. I just had, this was the main question I had when I was doing my grant research phase, and actually discovered a couple useful tricks that I found that, well, first I just did a lot of research, and I was able to find, specific to the one we're looking at, is I found a lot of like prospectus stuff that they have kind of buried deep in places for these grants that they kind of, some of them are kind of internal. Like one was a slideshow of the previous year's winners of this grant, university grants, that they showed at their like little symposium they meet with, but they still had it as a public, like file resource. It wasn't easy to find, but sometimes it's just kind of digging around. And then the other main thing was that I found really helpful was just if it's a government agency, they usually have someone who's meant to be your point of contact, like a representative.
yeah.
So for like the EDA, we're looking at a grant with the EDA under, I can't remember the branch under the EDA, the Office of like Innovation or whatnot, but they have their offices in Denver, the Denver regional were within, and then they have a specific representative for Montana. And it just took doing a conference phone call with him, and he gave us a bunch of information. And then he has a lot of internal stuff he can share with us, and that he's actually scheduled to meet with us, I think next week when he comes to Missoula. And he's basically going to help guide us. His whole job is to guide us through the process because he wants us to get the grant.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great tip. I think actually talking to the funder and saying, what have you got for resources for new applicants, and digging into their website, and figuring out, okay, who got funding, what do they probably write grants for? Those are great tips. Thanks, Blake.
Josh, I also have, working with SKC, they just applied, and I was part of the needs assessment writing of that grant, and they just applied for their new fiscal year 17 grant. And I was like, my nose was in that grant for 3 months or so, and the previous one that they had been awarded for 5 years. And I could talk with them and see if maybe they'd be willing to share some of the sections of that. And I know for a fact the more successful the grant is, typically based on what you were saying about having concise, like short sentenced. And that was one of the things that our staff member, Joanne Morrow, was very good at. And we just send it to her and she would cut the fat, trim the fat, and really kind of tidy it up. So it would be, I believe it's a really successful grant. They've had it for almost 30 years. So they're doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that those personal connections and trust where you're like, we're not going to steal from your narrative, but we want to get a sense of what made you successful. It's a good question for a supervisor to ask. Sarah, Lenore points out that she uses GuideStar to help find the Foundation IRS tax info. And that also shows who, what, and how much they've granted to other groups. Sorry. It's useful to know their averages, where they've granted before, and if you know any of those people, or if you or others have worked with winning grantees, then you can contact them directly. So GuideStar is a great database that not only has these EIN numbers, but also will list kind of foundation giving activity, I think, for funders. And so you can look down and see who have they provided funding to. And if you know those folks, hit them up and get some information. That's great. Good point, Lenore. Thank you. Okay, well, I think we are right at our time. limit here. Thank you for making yourselves available here this morning, and feel free to contact me. For some reason, I shut down the last screen, but I think you probably have my email somewhere. vanek@mtcompact.org, and our general line is 243-5177. Have nice weekends, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you in Helena. Take care.